Making sense of your dollars, safeguarding your future. Learning to manage your money, invest, save and plan for the future. For the future, the Financial Literacy Bureau, that's the way to go. Making sense of your dollars, safeguarding your future. Make plans and build, stretch every dollar. I tell you, knowledge is power, power. Woo! Making sense of your dollars, safeguarding your future.
For more information, call 535-7700 or visit our website commerce.gov.bb. The Financial Literacy Bureau, making sense of your dollars, safeguarding your future.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And certainly, I think, I'm not sure if you guys heard the introduction by David, but I certainly can begin. Thank everyone for joining the call. I think for me, financial literacy is just one of those very important things, and I'm glad that the Bureau have come about and certainly is talking Barbadians through the importance of financial literacy and at least providing some tools. And today we're going to talk about budgeting for family life, an important topic. There are different families, whether they're single families, married couples, whatever the case may be. And especially in these very difficult times, I always, we joke around that one, we're in a pandemic. Who would have thought we'd also have volcano ash on our doorstep? And all these different things are contributing and helping the reasons why it's even more important for us to budget. So as we talk through today, just a bit about me. Raymond Haynes, as I'm not sure if everyone heard the introduction, have a life in consultancy, being a chartered accountant, also a chartered business valuator, so try to value businesses as they come. I've had a role as an investment advisor with a mutual fund, and then also a financial advisor. I think the most important part of all of that is, as with everybody else, I'm still trying to find the right balance of spend and save. That certainly has always been important, and I continue to find, vary the ways of which I do that. And hopefully we can share a bit today as well. From a housekeeping perspective, today's presentation is all mine. And as much as I work for Deloitte, what I'm going to say today doesn't reflect the views or opinions or advice of Deloitte. But let's more importantly have a conversation. And you will see that's a recurring theme throughout the presentation today when I talk about different topics. It's unlikely that what I cover today and what we discuss and any questions that you ask is going to cover everyone's personal challenges. There are just some challenges or some particular topics that are very personal to you or personal to you that we won't cover today. But hopefully we walk away with some snippet of what you may be able to use in your everyday life. It's unlikely to cover all the great ideas for your family's financial objectives and budgeting. So definitely make the session interactive and share your ideas. Let's be open-minded. Great if everyone takes the opportunity to contribute, ask questions, and let's have fun. No presentation is good without a very cheesy kind of slogan. So one of the ones that I have here is let's be a star, be a star. Let's stop in everything we do. Let's think, let's act, and let's reflect. And when we talk about budgeting, that probably is a good acronym, being a star, to make sure that we create the best budgets for us, but also reflect on those budgets so that we can tailor it as we go ahead. And one of the other things I would say is the objectives is take 2 or 3 things from the discussion today and try to implement them, as you go on from today onwards. In terms of the agenda, quick discussion about the challenges we're facing, stages of life, savings and debt, setting financial goals, demystifying budgets, tips on savings, tips on managing debt, and then, very quickly we move into the Q&A. And I'm very interested in, anything that the participants on today's call are interested in raising and discussing with us. So setting financial goals. One of the first things that, I put on the slides was the stages of life, savings, and debt. And everyone on this call is likely to be considering or in different stages at this point in time. At some point we were someone's dependent when we were in school. We may or may not have decided to go ahead and seek adult education, or you're adult now, you're buying a car, trying to buy your first home, starting a family, more interested in either pursuing higher education or traveling, or even thinking towards retirement. So everyone is likely to go and be at a different stage, and budgeting in all of these scenarios is still very important. Now, one of the interesting things, and I recently started having more conversations with my friends and my colleagues about budgeting, but what I've realized is that the talk about finance and money scares people. One, they don't want to talk about it. They may feel they don't earn enough. They may not want everybody else to know what they earn. And it's not about telling anyone how much you're earning or whatever the case may be. But once you're able to put out there in the atmosphere, you know, I'm budgeting, here's what I want to do, and get the ideas of your friends. Again, don't tell everyone your business, but get the ideas of your friends. You know, what are likely investments? What are they putting their money in? How are they budgeting? What kind of budgets works for them? What is the best app to use, etc. And it really, as I said, a recurring theme is going to be having a conversation about financing, about budgeting, etc. And one of the key things here is, you know, I've heard I have so many expenses to pay. Where do I start with budgeting? Budgeting is the least of my concerns right now. Where should I put my money? So with budgeting, you will always have income coming in and you would have expenses or cash going out. So cash coming in and cash going out. Certainly as part of budgeting, one of the things that you're trying to make sure is that you have more money coming in and you're planning for that money that's coming in and certainly reducing the amount of money that's going out. One of the other things that I'm hearing about, and strangely enough, someone gave me a call before this session today, what are good investment options? So where do I put my money? Now that's an interesting one, and I'm happy to really get some conversation started on that particular topic, but I'd love to explore that a little bit more. How much do I need to retire? What are the right questions to ask, and who do I ask? Who can I talk to? Is it family? Is it a financial advisor? Is it a friend? Where do I get the right information? And some people feel as though it's just too much information. Everybody is coming to me about how to balance this, about how to save for this, about how to invest for this. It really is too much information. I'm lost. How do I get my bearings? So, you know, what are your family's financial goals? And that certainly is an important one. And there are different goals. Whether you are, you know, as I said, preparing to start a family, you are protecting the current family through insurance or otherwise, whether you're educating your family, purchasing a home or doing home upgrades, financial security or retirement, we all have different goals. And it's not just one goal. I mean, if I think to myself, I'd like to think that I'm not that old, but I'm also thinking about retirement, all right? Because we've heard all these things about NIS and et cetera. Is it going to be enough to pay during my retirement? So then therefore I need to be putting something aside now so that when I do retire, I have something that can supplement my NIS. Always upgrades or repairs to your home. Now, we probably didn't have in our goals or our objectives that we will need to be cleaning ash from around our homes over the last month or so, but it's all about, you know, saving for a rainy day. Now, one of the things that's going to be very important for this session is taking what we learn from other people and having a conversation. And that doesn't have to be, you know, talking to the person next to you or on the street. There are persons every day that is using their own time and energy to put things in the atmosphere. One of those persons is Crystal. I used to work with Crystal a long time ago, and hopefully she doesn't mind that I am, you know, putting her YouTube, I believe it's on YouTube, her YouTube channel out there. But if you can go to YouTube and or Google Crystal's Corner, one of the interesting episodes that I thought Crystal had was Managing Those Pennies, episode 43. And part of it was about teaching your children financial responsibility. And some people may ask, what does financial responsibility or teaching my children about financial responsibility have to do with budgeting? It's all important because money in and money out, and part of the budget. Teaching your children how to manage their finances early helps with their budgeting process when they grow up, but also helps with yours and helping get them involved in the process early. So I think one of the first polling questions I'd want to throw out to everyone is, what is your and your family's main financial goal? And as the poll comes up, there are a number of different options there, and I'd love to see what everyone's responses are, and I'll give you about 30 seconds or a minute to answer that. So if you can just really go into the poll and start answering, it'd be good to see. Some good responses coming in. We're at 20%. I'd love to see a little bit more. Okay, that's rising. Okay. So about 2/3 of the persons have answered. I'd love to see that get up to 100%, really, so that we can understand, where you are. What are your thoughts? What are you looking for? What is your main kind of financial goals? Good. Okay. All right. It seems like we're hovering around 85%. So I'll give you, 5 more seconds to get in your last answers. Change your answer if you want. And then we can get the poll all closed, because we probably have virtually most of the persons answering there. Some interesting responses, and these all anonymous. So I don't know any of the any particular person's answer. It's all anonymous in terms of the poll. So interesting. I would say that probably is the same answer. The same answer for me. In terms of financial freedom and financial security, it'd be lovely to be able to put some things away so that, for a rainy day, I'm not worrying about where am I going to get the money from to pay for a certain thing, or maybe, who knows, maybe tomorrow or in a year's time or 2 years time, I don't even have to worry about getting up and going into the office or going to work. I am so financially secure and have so much financial freedom. I'm just worrying about where the next vacation is. Who knows? But financial freedom and security means different things for different people. And hopefully, as we go through this discussion about budgeting and tips for saving, etc., you can really think through how do you move yourself, perhaps in the situation that you're in, to be more financially secure. So certainly, thanks for that. All right. If we keep going, one of the other things that I'd want to talk about is, how do I set financial goals? And this is important because a lot of persons set goals, especially at the beginning of the year. We know we all have those New Year's resolutions that we never keep. But it's important to set financial goals and set them the right way, or set any goal really. And one of the acronyms that is typically used out there is SMART. So setting SMART goals. Be very specific around the goal, make it measurable, make it actionable, relevant, and put a time period on it. Don't say I'm looking to save, $1,000 and that's it. When are you hoping to save it? How are you planning on saving it? Or you want to buy a car, or whatever the case may be, but there's no goal around how you're saving, what loan you can afford, or any of that. So certainly setting SMART goals is important. And key elements there is, what is important to you? What issues are you facing, right? Because you're facing your own personal goals, and it's important to understand that and implement. So if we take a very quick example in terms of being smart with our goals, being specific. So let's say, for instance, we want to save the deposit for a car loan. Save the deposit to purchase a car to get to work on time. Right? So maybe, you're bumming a lift from the neighbor. Make it measurable. You need to save $2,400. Make it actionable. You're going to save $200 or $100, whatever you can afford, by reducing the amount of times you eat out. And in this scenario, in this particular pandemic, with restaurants not being open as much, I don't know how people are eating out, or whether you're buying lunch every day, or whatever the case may be. But what step are you going to take to save an extra $200 or $100 over the next year, or whatever the case may be? Make it relevant. You're depending on your neighbor right now for rides to work, or you're catching a bus, or you're doing something else, and you really think that a car is going to make a difference, then that is relevant to you. So getting to work on time, or using it to do other things is what makes it relevant for you. So make the goal relevant, and the time bound here, or the timeline here, is 12 months. So $200 over the next 12 months is what you're looking at. Of course, as the moderator said in the beginning, pose any questions in the chat, or if you want to make this interactive, certainly raise your hand, We can certainly bring you on and ask any questions you want. And don't be shy. Let's literally have a conversation about budgeting and financial goals, etc. Let's talk about budgets a little bit. Budget and stick to it. Let's have another poll question. Does everyone right now use a budget? So another poll question I would love to see the responses to, and there are 4 answers that I have up here. Always, inconsistently, I want to, and those are a waste of time. Interesting answers. No, that's good. Okay. So we probably have about 80% of the persons responding, which is good. Maybe just give a couple more seconds for persons to put in there. I mean, I'd love to see, everyone's response. Do you use a budget? I'm seeing some really good answers. Inconsistently, I'd love to hear why. Whether persons can put in the chat, what are the reasons for that? No, but I want to. Why haven't you started? Easier said than done, I know. But good to get some responses there. Make this really interactive. Maybe put in the chat some of the reasons that that you haven't as yet started using the budget. What are the issues? One of the things that I will talk about is some good apps that I use, and maybe give my own personal experience around budgeting and how it's helped. So looking at the poll results, we have 41% of persons saying yes they do, but inconsistently, and almost equally 39% saying no, but I want to. And we definitely have 20% of the persons saying yes, always. And it's also interesting to see how people maintain that, because part of it is getting in the mind frame of maintaining the use of the budget and what type of budget you're using. So we certainly will look at that as well. Let's keep moving. So as we talk about the what's, the whys, and the hows, simply a budget is a plan for your money in and your money out, income and expenses. Easier said than done, I agree. But I always tell people with budgets, etc., how do you maintain it? You're the boss. Take control, right? And there are many ways to budget, and different ways that people create budgets. I've heard people say, spend then save, and save then spend. There's a zero-based budget, the 50-30-20 type budget, and the debt-free budget. And I mean, in case I don't remember if I cover it later on, but the ones that we can get into is an interested one is save then spend. That's the one that I typically use. And I'll get into paying myself first. If I make $1 today, I always say, okay, well, I got to put 30 cents away for, whether it be retirement, whether it for a rainy day, whether it for emergency fund, and then I could spend the rest on rent, on food, anything else. But I prefer the spend and save type of budget for me, and I kind of budget out where I'm actually going to spend that money. I find that easier. Other people say, okay, well, I want a zero-based budget. I know what's coming in, but based on my financial circumstances, I only want to spend as much as I earn right now, including savings, right? And put that in. So interesting types, but really a simple plan about the money coming in and the expenses going out is what you're looking at, and take control. You're the boss of your own money, and important for you to look at.
Raymond, if I can interject, there's a question there that I would like you to address before you go too far.
Okay.
The person is asking, if you have a budget, but you go over or redirect funds on a monthly basis, does that count as budgeting consistently?
Does that count on budget? Does that count as budgeting consistently? So right now you have, let's say for instance, you have a budget, right? You have money coming in of $2,000. You know that you want to put 500 or 200 to, let's say, to savings, 10%, whatever number persons are doing, and 1,800 you have allocated at the beginning of the month. But listen, everyone is living their life. Everyone is living a daily life. Let's say, for instance, exactly what we went through. At the beginning of April 1st, and no no pun on it being April Fool's Day, but let's say, for instance, you sat down on the 31st of March and you started your budget for April. And that's exactly what you did. You took your $2,000, you allocated $200 to savings, you had to pay some rent, you had to, pay for your child's school, whatever the case may be. Who was really anticipating that this volcano in St. Vincent was going to erupt on April 9th? And then therefore, whether it is that you then need to do something different in order to get out your house, or you can't make the amount of money that you wanted to because you can't get out on the road and make any sales, and life happens. So I guess the net point is you just need to make sure that you get back on track. There are things there are things that are gonna happen, and whether it is that you need to take that out of the money that you're earning in a particular month, or that you have an emergency fund or some sort of savings that you can use rather than taking out from your budget, I would say that's a decision that persons would have to make given their own personal financial circumstances. Ideally, it would be awesome if you can keep to your budget and also put some money away for savings, whether it be an emergency fund, etc., so that when things like that unexpected come up, you have a pool or reserve that you can rely upon. Not sure if that answers the question, but I certainly wouldn't wrap anyone over the knuckles for unexpected expenses and needing to kind of reallocate funds or whatever the case may be based on those unexpected expenses. Any other questions, David?
There's a question, and I believe you will come to this eventually, but it's asking how much of your income should you save monthly?
Gotcha. I will come to that, but if I don't, just remind me about that question.
Will do.
Now, one of the things is, let's burn the myths. Persons are saying budgets are only those in trouble. As a matter of fact, strangely enough, the persons who are probably better at budgeting and use them most consistently are the persons not in trouble. And the reason that they're probably not in trouble is because they have very diligently maintained some sort of a budget to manage their income and more importantly, probably their expenses, including their savings. So, for those who find themselves, struggling through the month, especially, sometimes just putting pen to paper, literally sometimes, or using an app or whatever the case may be, and really monitoring what you need to do. If you buy lunch every day as an example, see if you can, change those habits, or minimize the amount of money you spend on lunch, or start cooking as an example. But the persons who do better at budgeting are probably those persons who are actually not in trouble. Budgets will limit my fun and take too much time. They don't take they take as much time as you want. It's about putting down a list of, where I'm earning, and for most people that may be one source of income. In this day and age, as I see a lot of younger persons, especially even the older generation, having a side gig. And I certainly with that, as I tell people, I also have a side gig going, they laugh at me, right? They think, guy, come on, man, you working at Deloitte, you don't got no side gig. But, I think everyone in some way need to start thinking about multiple sources of income, and so that you can feed that into your budget to support the expenses that are there. One of the other things that people say is, man, budgets are for accountants. I don't need to do that. Budgets are for every single person so that you can manage your life. Your budget, what should you do? Just get started. That is the first thing I tell persons. No excuses, just get started. Don't wait until, persons like to say, I'm going to wait at the end of the year to get started, or the end of the month, etc. Literally, during this conversation, pull out a piece of paper, get your phone in the app, and start using it. Set objectives as a family. Sit down with your family, with your spouse, whatever, your aunt, your uncle, your mom, whoever, and really set objectives. What do we want to accomplish at the end of a period, at the end of the year, for 2021, for, the month of May, whatever it is, and get started and set those objectives. Remember the SMART goals. Identify the sources of income and think about new sources of income. Sure, you're working on a job now, but what do you like to do? What else can you do on the side that can earn more income? And some people make this more complicated than sometimes it needs to be. Literally, I was having a conversation with one of with one of my colleagues the other day, and you go to their home and they have a lot of used clothing and used things that they don't use because they just was a serious shopaholic. And one of the things that they're doing now is simply, or they were doing, they're going to start doing, and they've started doing out of their home, so to speak, is saying to some persons, look, I got this, I want to sell it. There's Beijing market and all these different things, and persons are getting income from that. So one of the things that I think is important as part of the overall kind of, setting financial goals and budgeting is thinking about other sources of income. Identify the expenses and balance it. Payments plus savings equals income, or income should be distributed to savings and payments. Get started with week 1, plan for those expenses and when they're going to happen, to the extent that you know when you're going to have to pay your rent, when you're going to have to pay your phone bill, when you'd want to put some money away somewhere, and record what you spend. There are 2 good apps that I've found, and certainly the one on the right, Money Manager, Expense and Budget. That one has really worked for me, and I've used that consistently on a daily basis since January 2020. January 1st, 2020, actually. I was, unfortunately, I was one of those who said in 2019 that I'm going to start budgeting, and I'm going to start it as a New Year's resolution. And I'm also going to watch every single cent that I spend. And the app on the right has really worked for me. What I didn't do, and I probably should have done, was kind of show some of the graphs that app had shown me, so that by the time I got through January, February, March of 2020, and I was like, whoa, I spend a lot of money on food. And I didn't realize that, just from going here, going there, going out with my friends, spending money at the supermarket, whatever. And I thought I could really cut back on some of that and if I do the shopping, I may not be doing the cooking, but if I do the shopping, I don't necessarily need to go and buy lunch every single day. And that's one of the ways that I kind of cut back. Not like the pandemic didn't help, because then it really cut down on going to restaurants and a whole bunch of things. But if you can take out your phones right now and look at one of these 2 apps, either Good Budget on the left or Money Manager, Expense and Budget by Railbyte on the right, I'd give, if you can just indicate by maybe a raise of hands or something, if you found it, if there are any challenges in getting there, or in the chat. But I'd love persons to pick up their phone right now, look and see in your apps, whether whether you're using an iPhone or Android, Good Budget or Money Manager, and maybe put in the chat, if you're able to find it. All right. In the meantime, we'll keep going. So tips and tricks to stay on track. In terms of budgeting to zero, income minus expenses equals 0, right? What that is really trying to say is don't overspend. Be very careful with your money. If you know that you make, $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, whatever the case may be, in different sources of income, plan to spend. And when I say spend, I mean, I use that term loosely sometimes, but spend and save, no more than you earn, so to speak. So don't spend $5,000 and then therefore dip into, whether it be the credit card and some other things, if you don't have to. As I said, everyone have their own personal life to live, and everyone doesn't live the same life, but as much as possible, income minus expenses minus savings, net out to 0. Credit cards, in terms of tips, only use one. Now, admittedly, I have one credit card, but that one credit card is shared with a family member. Just some personal tidbits on me, but I literally only use one credit card. And I remember 2 years ago or 3 years ago walking into the bank and said, "Look, you guys keep increasing my limit all the time, and that needs to stop today. Thank you for recognizing that maybe I'm a good customer. I'm giving you a lot of money, but don't keep moving my limit from $1,000 to $2,000 to $3,000, etc." One of the rules of thumb that I always use is, if you can keep your credit card limit to, let's say, for instance, you get paid on a monthly basis. Again, I like to use $2,000 as an easy number for me. Let's say you get paid $2,000 every month. I usually say to people, a good rule of thumb is to have a limit on your credit card that is no more than your monthly salary. It makes it easier to manage, because one of the things that you find is that persons like the idea of their credit card limit increasing, but you'd be surprised how much credit card interest is. And a lot of people don't know how much their credit card interest is. These credit card interests could be 20%, sometimes 28%, 28.5%, 25%, but the interest rate on credit cards is high. And that's something that you want to be very careful of. Other persons use the trick, so to speak, or the tip of, paying off the balance to the extent that they can every month, so they don't have to pay the credit card interest. That's easier when you're really able to manage your spending. So if you do have a budget, you can manage your spending. It's easier to pay off the balance. And then it's easier to pay off the balance if it's manageable. If you know that your credit card limit is only, a month's salary, so to speak, then it makes it easier to manage all of that. So one of those things, try the no spend challenge. And I think I saw this on one of the websites that I came to, one of the Instagram accounts that I will mention later. I think they had a no spend challenge of, they're not going to spend any money on Wednesday that they don't have to, or for this week that they don't have to, or I'm not going to go to any restaurants for this week, or on Wednesday, Thursdays, Fridays, whatever. You can make that no spend challenge however you want, but at least it's an option that you can try. A meal planning, a big one. We spend so much money on food and lunch, etc. And it's about planning your meals and whether it is that you cook on Sundays or whatever, and you plan out your meals for the rest of the week, whatever it is. But that is a good tip to use. You can be a minimalist, go minimal, minimize impulse buying and sleep on it. Sometimes if you want to buy a new pair of shoes or whatever, just literally sleep on it. Do you really buy those shoes? Do you really need to buy those shoes? Do you really need to buy that particular item or whatever? And one of the big things for me before I move on to the other side is I'm a huge component of pay yourself first. And hence why I say, look, I set aside my savings first, and everything after that, I can try spending in the way that I want. I got to pay my rent or whatever the case may be. I got to pay my car loan, etc. And I will do my budget on that basis. So at the beginning of every month, okay, I make $1,000. I put 200 aside for my savings, whether that be retirement, whether that be emergency fund, etc. And the rest of the 800, I figure out how I'm going to spend that. And when that 800 is gone, I'm done. That's my way of doing my budget, but there are different ways that persons may be more comfortable. One of the big tips and tricks, as I said before, have a conversation, talk to people. Whether it is through, a lot of really good Instagram handles or otherwise that I'm seeing popping up, use them. Talk to people, talk to your friends, talk to your family about those tricks. Share what is working for you. For those persons who responded in the poll and said that they have always used the budget, share some tips of how you were able to maintain that, because that is so important. Now, as I mentioned before, two of the Instagram accounts that I came across was Islander Becoming Financial Savvy and Debt Free Caribbean. Again, I would love persons to pick up their phone if they have an Instagram account. Find these two handles or Instagram accounts here and follow them. I thought they had some fantastic advice. Whether you are a professional, I think you're a professional, etc. There was just some really good real life examples. And I think there's a couple involved in Debt Free Caribbean, and they shared their personal experience with budgeting, saving, investing. And I thought it was really good. There's also a new Instagram handle, and I hadn't the opportunity to kind of update the slide deck to mention it, but I think it's called My 2 Cents. And Nikita is the person who runs that. Again, I hopefully she's not offended, or anybody here is not offended by me mentioning the Instagram accounts, but some fantastic advice and personal experiences by these persons who are going through very similar things. So if someone can just put in the chat whether they were able to find one or more of these Instagram accounts, that'd be great. Let me just check the chat real quick. Interesting. Someone said investments count as savings, but they provide a better return normally. Agreed. So I think actually that was you, David, right? Agreed.
Yes,
And we
it was.
certainly
I
can.
just trying to keep
Yeah,
the conversation going while you talk.
I got you. Fantastic. Good. So I will keep you on that. But on that topic, I mean, when I say savings, for me, when I say savings, and I agree, for me, savings mean anything that else that I kind of put my money into an investment vehicle, a savings account, retirement vehicle, etc. So when I say savings, I am using it in an all-encompassing way. But I would love to have any questions on investment or savings products, etc., that people find to be working for them, and we can get into that discussion. But fantastic point. All right. So poll question number 3. Has COVID helped your ability to save and manage money, or it hasn't? And 5 responses there. Very interested to see, how persons potentially have been impacted by the pandemic, or how it, either positively or negatively. So would love to see some responses there. And I will share my personal experience with how COVID has impacted me. I think David, there's someone who's raised their hand. I'm not sure if they want to, why the poll is going. Maybe we can answer that particular question.
Yes, let me see. I think they took their hand down.
Okay, maybe it was a mistake.
Yeah, it was a mistake.
Okay. All right. Interesting responses. Varied responses. We are 83% now in terms of people responding. It'd be good to see a little bit more. If you haven't answered the poll questions yet, it'd be good to see a bit more there. All right, love. We are almost at 90%. Maybe we can cut off if we hit 90 in the next 10 seconds. Fantastic. All right, so maybe we can cut it off there. Interesting responses. So I think, just over almost 40% of persons saying yes, I now spend less. And I would have to admit that is my personal circumstance. I now spend less because I go out less. Also because I am also I'm not risk averse. I'd probably, even though I'm an accountant, I still think I will take some risky chances with certain things. So I'm not fully risk averse, but also because you don't know what's going to happen or how long this is going to extend. I've also tried to cut back on some of my spending. So I literally now spend less. Someone says, there are 22% of the person said, no, I now earn less. And there are a lot of people impacted by that. This pandemic certainly has been wide ranging, and budgets, around how you are managing earning less and the expenses that you have. Budgets probably would help a lot in that scenario as well. It actually will help in every single scenario. 70% of the person said that, very little or no impact by the pandemic, and that's interesting. And no, I now spend more. So that's interesting. I would love to understand the circumstances where persons are spending more, given the impact of COVID. So certainly, everyone, thank you for that. So one, tips on savings. Here's what we can do. If everyone can, in the chat or otherwise, or think through for your own personal self, what are the reasons we always talk about, reasons we don't save? And I think that's interesting. So maybe take 2 seconds or 5 seconds to think through all the reasons you say you don't save, or you don't invest. As I said, I probably am using savings a little bit too loosely, but Any reasons that you don't currently save and you don't invest? And interestingly, when I was putting together this slide deck, I spoke to a number of persons about their particular reasons of not saving or not investing. And some of the top reasons were as we have here. So some persons say, look, I'm too busy keeping up with the Joneses. At least that was my interpretation of what they said. But they said, look, I constantly go out. My friends want to go out, etc. And by the end of the month, once you've done all these things, you don't have as much savings as you want, or you don't have enough money to put savings aside. I guess they're taking the approach of, let me spend first on what's left over, I put into savings. Perhaps what would work for them is the other way around. Save some money first, invest some money first, and then whatever else is left, you can spend based on your needs. I don't earn enough. Don't have a plan or a goal. Maybe there's not a budget at the beginning. I'll do it later. All the excuses that we can, and too many expenses or debt, which is a reality for some of us. And through budgeting, we can actually get to the point where we understand the expenses. You'd be surprised how many people truly don't know the expenses or what the expenses are going to be and teed up for the month. So interesting, right? Everyone, could you just give me 1 second, please? Apologies for that. I just need to plug in my laptop. So, we have all the reasons and excuses in the world, but certainly we need to move past those. One of the questions I don't want to forget, and I'll talk about types of savings and here. One of the questions that persons ask is, how much do I save? And there are all these rules of thumbs out there, right? Whether it be 10%, whether it be 20%, etc. And that is dependent on everyone's personal circumstance. For me, I try to save more than 30% of the income that I am bringing in. Or sometimes even up to 40%, depending on the month or depending on how the side hustle, so to speak, is doing, or even making the decision that the profit that I make from the side hustle, so to speak, goes directly to investments and savings. And so I think that's going to be dependent on a lot of persons. A lot of persons are so accustomed to the rule of thumb, so to speak, but it's easy to answer this question when you talk about your financial goals. What are you hoping to achieve? Are you hoping to retire with $1 million or $10,000 or $50,000 at the end? Are you going towards financial freedom? A lot of that answer depends on what your financial goals and objectives are, and how much do you need in order to accomplish those goals and how much you're making. So that when you think through your goals, let's say, for instance, you've sat down with, whether a colleague that can give some good advice, right? Everyone that you get advice from is not necessarily the best advice, but you can, hopefully you're able to discern what makes sense and what doesn't. Let's say, for instance, you sit down, and I'm just giving a hypothetical example here, and you've decided that, perhaps you're going to, save, or retirement is going to be, I want to be able to retire. At the end of retirement, I want to be able to live off of, $40,000 a year, including my NIS. In order for me to do that for $40,000 a year, perhaps I need to be putting aside, $200 every month. Then that becomes part of the plan, and that $200 is what you put as your percentage, whether that percentage is 10%, 20%, or otherwise. If that is a little bit harder to do, then I would say sit down and really think through what those financial objectives are. What do you have to do, or what do you want to do over the next year, 3 years, 5 years? How much is it going to cost, and how much do you need to set aside? The best answer is through a financial plan as opposed to an arbitrary rule of thumb. Because certainly for me, in that rule of thumb, as I said, I try to save a significant portion, save and invest a significant portion of my income. It doesn't always work out because you have circumstances that you need to look at. But types of savings, emergencies, short term, it's always good to have a month or two of your salary put aside, or some sort of short-term savings for emergency purposes, and you never know what that's going to be. Perhaps your child gets sick and you need to run to the doctor, or otherwise at least you have some emergencies put ahead. Hard time savings is more medium term. For unfortunately the pandemic has stretched out, but some persons may consider that kind of hard time savings until you may have lost your job if you're in the hospitality sector, and at least you had some savings until you find another job. Unfortunately, the pandemic is really stretching out, and hard times may mean long-term unemployment for some persons, and finding other opportunities. Maybe you got to save for your education. Maybe you want to save for a vacation, for a down payment on your home. Financial freedom. I was quite encouraged that a lot of persons thought, their goal really is financial freedom and security. Saving for retirement. And for me, a big one, especially in our community, is generational savings and generational wealth. And we can have a long conversation about that, but really thinking through generations. I remember one lady saying to me that with her family and in her community, one of the ways that they have kind of generated generational wealth was through insurance. And I thought that was interesting when she said that, but she said, look, the senior people in their families all have insurance, have agreed to have insurance, and they've had that for a couple generations, so that, when that older person, so to speak, passes on, the family members, whether it be the sons, daughters, whatever the case may be, they're not starting from scratch, and they have a pool of funds that then they can use to start businesses, pay off the mortgage, whatever the case may be. And I thought that was interesting. Now, there are many different ways to generate generational wealth, including what a lot of Bajans, in my opinion, are scared to do, and that is starting their own business. Don't get me wrong, easier said than done, because starting a business is not just a walk in the park for a lot of people, right? You need a plan. It's scary moving out on your own, etc. But one of the ways to go about generational wealth is start your own business, and then certainly get your family involved in that and keep going. And there certainly are other ways that, for generational savings and investment. But it certainly is one of those things that is near and dear to my heart personally, because I think as a community, we need to be thinking through how do we build wealth in our community, wealth throughout our generations. Now, tips on managing debt, again, important as part of the budgeting process. Know who you owe. I made the comment that some persons don't know, who they owe and how much they owe. And I thought that was surprising in talking to some people, but they constantly go through, paying an expense or paying a debt every time, without truly writing down and remembering who you owe. And I thought it was so interesting that persons raised that. One of the tips of managing debt is sometimes to start with the lowest balance. And some people will call this kind of the waterfall, right? So if you have a loan for $1,000 or whatever, and then you move up to the next one, but start with the lowest one first. And it will talk to the last point there that I have with small wins, right? So as you pay off that small one, you feel good about yourself. Okay, I paid off one balance. Let me move off to the next. Pay more than the minimum, especially when you have a credit card, right? As I mentioned before, that credit card interest, man, that could break your back sometimes. And it's good to kind of pay more than the minimum. And to those who can afford it, if you can pay off the balance every month, then, kudos to you. But as much as you could, pay more than the minimum sometimes on your credit card, on your loan. Try to get it down as fast as you could, within reason, right? Stop limit increases. Literally, if your bank is moving your credit card limit every 6 months or every quarter, whatever the case may be, call them up and tell them stop that. Put a note on your account saying, do not give me any more limit increases. Why do you need a credit card that is, I'm just calling random numbers, so hopefully no one takes offense, 5,000 or 10,000 or 20,000 or even, 40,000, unless you're running a business and need a credit card for certain purposes. I would say, cut that out on an individual basis. Convert revolving debt to a loan. So one of the things that I did, and I had my loan with one of my credit cards with one of the banks, and they kept moving my limit to the point where I thought I was having difficulty managing my own debt. I went into the bank and said, look, this has to stop. You need to term out this debt. So give me a loan for 3 years to pay off this balance I'm struggling with. I reduced my credit card limit, and I can use that, and I've been in a much better state since then. Don't be afraid to renegotiate, or negotiate. If you walk into a bank and they are a financial institution, credit union, and they say, look, this loan is 8%, go get another quote from somebody else, or go back to the bank and say, look, but can you do 7.5? Can't you do 6? You'd be surprised how much a 0.5% or a full percent on a loan or mortgage, how far that can go. And there are a lot of persons out there sitting on their mortgage right now, pre-pandemic or pre the drop in interest rates, and haven't gone into the bank and say, hey, my interest rate is still 6% or 7% on my mortgage. Why is that not at 5% or 4.5%? Do you want me to move this to the next bank? And you really got to go in and be aggressive. It's your own, it's your finances. Go in and renegotiate what makes sense for you. Research the options. Stay away from your savings as much as you could, and avoid penalties or late payments. So some really good points there for persons and interested to see how the other ways that persons are reducing and managing their debt. Again, if David, if persons can, if you can communicate with some persons around their ideas, I'd love to hear them and see them. And celebrate small wins. I think as part of this entire process, it's not just about paying other people and paying debt. Celebrate small wins. Give yourself a pat on the back or a high five when you're able to pay off the smallest loan, etc. Now, before we get into the Q&A, one of the things, the key takeaways for me from the discussion today would be the top 3. Stop and think. What are your objectives? Is there arbitrary 10% or 20% of revenue or income that I should be saving? That is your own personal circumstance. Try to maximize your savings and investment, and probably more in your investments, more active earning. Because to be honest, money from your investments is a side hustle, so to speak. I mean, I may put it in side hustle terms, but it's another source of revenue. If you can get into active investments, whether it be creating your own business, creating a side hustle, or active investments. And there's some out there that, if persons ask me questions, I can get into without, particularly naming any names, but all publicly available type investments, earn more of an interest rate perhaps than what maybe your financial institution is paying you. But think through your objective, figure out which budget works for you, and really think through, sit in a dark corner and think through what is your ability to change. If you're not doing the budget right now, what is stopping you from doing that? Pay yourself first. That's a big one for me. As I said, I always start with my savings first and go from there. And get it taken directly out of your salary or the wages and go directly to whatever investment vehicle, whether it be a credit union, whether it be something else you're doing, and do a monthly transfer so that you don't even touch it. You don't even see it before it goes there. And as I said, generational wealth, important for a community like ours to really start the conversation about how we build generational wealth. So don't just save, invest, right? So, saving is just putting some money aside, emergencies and maybe hard time savings, but find investment vehicles. And one of the questions I always get is, what are good investment vehicles? And I will move into the Q&A, but certainly when I start that, I also had to think through investment vehicles. Are we limited by investment vehicles here? How do we do that? What do we invest in? Are they instruments that we can, put more money in? How do I start a business? Life insurance, I think it's a must, especially if you have a young family. If you have a young son or daughter, especially, life insurance can be important. One person said to me that they don't have any life insurance. They're single and they're almost at retirement. They don't have life insurance. But what is more important for them is critical illness. So if they do become ill, how do they pay their medical expenses? How do they take care of themselves or get somebody to take care of them? And I thought that was interesting. So they're not just thinking about, if they happen to pass away, there's no one to pass the life insurance proceeds to. They're really thinking, if something happens to me at this age as a single person, how do I pay my expenses, etc. So even critical illness insurance sometimes makes sense. And it's not just one product. Diversify, not just a savings account, not just insurance, but really diversify your portfolio of savings and investments. And I'm happy to move into a discussion because that's really where we get into the meat of it all.
Thank you so much, Raymond. Very interesting and useful. I hope that the audience has found it just as useful as I have, despite being a qualified accountant like yourself. For the purposes of the audience, let me just introduce myself because I neglected to do that at the start. I was focused on the housekeeping and introducing our presenter. My name is David Simpson, and I am a technical advisor consultant with the Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, with special focus on the Financial Literacy Bureau. And I am happy to have been able to take time to moderate today's session. I've been monitoring the chat and having conversations with some of you based on your comments there. And I think what Raymond has been sharing has indeed been resonating and causing you to think a bit during the session. And I hope that that continues post-session and even when you take the opportunity to listen to today's webinar again. There are a few questions, Raymond, and I'll read them out and make a few comments myself because I think in some areas I need to indicate that there are sessions specific to some of these questions, that will be coming up so that persons don't think that your reference to some of these things was the start and the end of it. The first question that someone has there is, I think they're trying to say the reason they don't invest is that they're not au fait with the investment sector or the options available in the Caribbean and Barbados. And we will be having a specific session on investments later on in the series. But I think because you spoke to savings and you did reference investments and limited options and so on not long ago, I'll start with that question and have you share some thoughts in that regard.
Yeah, okay. I certainly can share from a personal perspective. So, you know, and my journey in terms of savings and investment has been a journey. You know, literally when I first started and I wanted my car, etc., it wasn't about investments. I literally was saying, okay, well, you know, I was getting, you know, maybe a bonus here or something here and I can put something aside, and I was doing it very infrequently. To the point where I got to a particular point in life and I said, well, hang on, I've been earning money all these years, and but if I look back at my investment or savings portfolio, it ain't nothing for me to jump about. And I'm sure it wasn't anything for anybody else to jump about. So I made a decision to really change that around. So I say all that to say that I started then looking at different vehicles, whether it be insurance. So I thought through not only saving for emergencies and hard times, so to speak, and having that reserve and fund set aside, but retirement. I wanted to increase my retirement savings. So the first thing I did was I called up a financial advisor at one of the insurance companies. And I said, look, I want to talk through investment options. I don't only want life insurance. I don't only want that as something that I only get, you know, money or whatever going to my beneficiaries after something happens to me and I pass away, Lord, you know, at whatever time that happens, it has to happen, not being morbid. But I also want other investment vehicles. I want something like an endowment. I want to be able to put some money in, and you know, at a point in time, just before retirement, say, I want to get a lump sum that I can kind of live off of, put into an annuity. And there were different investment vehicles that I was able to do that way. So insurance was one of those savings investment vehicles for me. And then I decided, well, you know, I have savings accounts, but I want to earn more of an interest. So I want to open a carry lend account. As again, I'm just giving my personal experience. Other persons may have other options out there. So carry lend and peer-to-peer lending was something interesting for me. And they currently offer interest rates that do fluctuate depending on the loans that are out there, but between, let's say, 7 and 8%. And I found it was an interesting vehicle for me to diversify, right? I didn't put all of my money in carry lend as an example. I put a portion there, put a portion of my monthly income in insurance. And then the other thing I was thinking through, with everything that's happening in the international markets, et cetera, how can I invest in the stock market? And I started investing in the stock market a bit more there. One of the other things that I'm also doing is I have also thought through, you know, how do I create my own business. And one of the things that I did is I recently incorporated my own company. And then one of those other things was I also, then, helping persons who also want to start their business, because I don't have to be the active investor. If you have someone who is, has a great business idea, etc., there's nothing wrong with supporting them, but there's a level of trust associated with that. So some of my investment options are, everybody has seen them and thought about them. Some persons may not have thought about or don't think they have access to those options. So I've just named a few. There's some other options that I want to explore a bit more in terms of maybe getting into real estate a bit more, but different investment options out there. You have to choose based on your financial objectives, and you want your personal views, I guess, on investment vehicles to really choose an option. But hopefully, what I've taught you in terms of my experience and some of the vehicles that I've chosen give some ideas as to what potentially you can do.
Okay, thanks, Raymond. One of the other questions we have is budgeting for recently laid off or redundant persons. What should they pay down first? Again, this is one of the first sessions in planning that I suggested last year when we started with the face-to-face sessions, but for some reason, the uptake was very low. But yes, it is one of the sessions we will be running again, because I think there's some specific peculiarities with persons who've lost their job, or as I keep saying, not just unemployed or redundant, but there are many people who are also underemployed, meaning they're not working the full 40 hours a week, or they are working 40 hours a week, but with a pay cut in order for their employers to maintain their employment. And I think that is just as important and critical as those who may have been laid off altogether. So your thoughts on persons in that category, what would you suggest they pay down first, whether it is with savings, whether it is with unemployment benefits, whether it is with a severance package? What would you suggest they pay down first?
Yeah, I mean, interesting point. One of the things in my current job that we look at is underperforming companies, as an example. One of the first pieces of advice that we would normally give to corporate clients, and it holds for individuals as well, is understanding your position. I always, and I was surprised at the point that persons are in a particular position but don't know who they owe. Now, I'm not assuming that the person who've asked the question is in that position and not know who they owe. But the first thing is to assess your own financial position. You may be laid off, but there may be income from supporting family members or a spouse. There may be NIS payments that you're getting for the next 3 months or 6 months, etc. So there may still be, and this is an assumption on my part, sources of income coming in. But the question you're asking is, what do you pay down first? So do you have a credit card? Do you have a loan, et cetera, et cetera? For me, it would always be the most expensive of those, right? Or for the ones that you are more at risk of struggling with. If you have a mortgage, as an example, the second thing I would say after you understand your position is to have a conversation with the financial institution. Let them know that you're having financial difficulties. Most financial institutions in this particular period are going to extend some sort of moratorium or some sort of assistance for persons, all right? They've made that public, that they would assist to the extent that they can, but you also have to demonstrate that there is a plan. So part of it, before you're thinking about what you pay off first, is what financial assistance can I get from any person that I owe in terms of a financial institution, whether it be a credit union, a bank, etc. Once you go through that, for me, again, it will always be the most expensive of the debt in terms of a credit card. I would want to attack that first, because credit card interest is one of those things that always, can be on your back. With a term loan, you can, when I say a term loan, whether it's for 5 years, 3 years, you can try to renegotiate that or put a moratorium, et cetera, on it. But for me, one of the first things I would try to pay off is my my credit card debt. If there are things like car loans, et cetera, you also have to think through, what are the implications of that? Talk to your financial institution, because if you need your car to get around, even if you're unemployed, you still need to, as the kids go back out to school or to do anything or to use the car to find a job, et cetera. maybe you want to keep it. If you don't need to keep the car, maybe it is that is something that you get rid of, as an example. So for me, if I go back to the question, it is the more expensive type of debt that I have, and the one that's harder to renegotiate with the financial institution, is the one that I'm trying to cut out first. The one that depends on the set of debt or circumstance that depend on something that there's a harsher penalty. For instance, if you perhaps miss your car loan and it's going to be taken up, but you need your car, or not paying your mortgage, etc., continue to pay that. But personally, for me, credit card is one of those things that I would definitely try to get rid of first.
Good advice. And as I said in the chat, I think persons, when it comes to budgeting, also need to factor in that the budget based on their circumstances will be unique. They can't just budget based only on theory. They have to look at their own situation, their priorities, their circumstances, and just apply all of the principles that you have provided to them this evening as well. So by example, you may say save 10% first, but if you're only able to save $50, which is 1% of your salary, do that, because it's a start, and it also creates the habit and the discipline, which is what really drives savings at the end of the day, even before we get to the amount. We have another question. With the change in commercial banks from debit cards to Visa debit, how does this affect your fees? I'll share a little bit of what I know and then have Raymond come in as well. Interestingly enough, in dealing with one of my banks just yesterday, after all of the PR, I found out that the debit cards have not been discontinued. You can still use your debit card. I think what has been discontinued or in the process of being discontinued is that your debit card may only work at point of sale machines. And in terms of ATM services, it may only work in your bank's ATM machines because of the proposed discontinuation of the Caris network. But debit cards are still being issued, ATM cards, by all of the banks, including the one bank that made a big PR stint out of it, in terms of having to get your Visa debit card by a certain time because the debit card was going to be discontinued. So that's one. In terms of the fees, my experience so far, and I deal with RBC and CABC quite a bit, and I have not seen any increase in my use of fees. Where I use my Visa debit card primarily for online shopping or paying license fees and so on for business. Of course, there's a 2% foreign exchange fee, but I've not seen any significant change in my fees from using the debit card or even from using the Visa debit card locally. If I am correct, one bank, there's a negligible charge, and the other one, I think there is no charge when you use the Visa debit cards locally. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Raymond. I was just sharing my experience first in terms of the fees and the Visa debit versus debit card.
Yeah, my experience is the same. I haven't experienced any change in fees beyond the regular account maintenance fees. Depending on the institution you're with, that may be $3 a month or whatever. I mean, Visa debit for a lot of persons is not credit. It's not a credit card. You can only spend on your Visa debit to the extent that you have the money in your bank account. They're just giving you Visa and MasterCard capabilities, depending on the institution. So if you want to shop online, etc., but it's not credit. So there should not be any true interest rate component for credit, because it's only what you have in your bank account.
That's correct. And I think the Visa debit cards, I have been advising a lot of people who want credit card type access but are fearful of controlling credit card debt that they should apply for a Visa debit card. It allows you to shop on Amazon. I have actually, interesting you said, Raymond, that you have one credit card. I have essentially reduced mine to one as well. And as I shrink the size of my business and so on, there was no need for more than one credit card. And I use Visa debit cards now. Even when I was traveling before COVID, I was using it to rent vehicles, to pay hotel fees and so on, because it saves you. I think you were highlighting the trap of credit cards, and I had similar experiences where the banks were increasing the limits all the time without any notice to you. Sometimes you find out when you swipe your card knowing, well, I should only be able to swipe $50, and you realize 100 goes through, then you realize the bank has given you another $2,000 in limit. So I think the Visa debit is a good starting point for a lot of persons who may want the accessibility of Visa and credit card type transactions, but without the monthly commitment and the interest and that credit card debt.
Yeah.
Another question, how does one go about budgeting where the income flows are erratic?
I think that's an interesting one. So again, it's about looking to see, and for those type of persons, I would probably say a budget is even more important. Because let's say, for instance, you are running a small business, and you know, and hopefully you know, I think, David, there's some small business or some seminars that may be applicable to small business persons. I'm not sure. I think they were.
You are correct. You are correct.
So especially if you're running a small business, you don't know how many customers are coming in, et cetera, but you still have to budget. And I would say in those cases where your income is erratic, budgets are even more important. You will have an idea of when, you know, you're likely to earn. But the trick to that, certainly as I've instructed some persons, is it may be erratic. You have an idea of, okay, in a particular month, I generally generate maybe $3,000 of sales or whatever the case may be. In that instance, putting some away and not spending is even more important, because in the periods where you have lower sales than expected, then you can kind of dip into, you know, that working capital option or that savings option to supplement the expenses, because the expenses in some cases will be very constant, right? You still have your phone to pay to generate the sales, or to have a living, the electricity, the water, whatever the case may be, are still fairly constant. And if your income is erratic to some extent, I would hope then that you also manage that by having your expenses, so to speak, very stable. And what I mean by that is to keep to only the expenses that you absolutely have to incur. So that would be a big one for me. And as I help businesses and persons navigate certain financial situations, especially when their income is erratic, it is, okay, what are your expectations? You know, you've gone through maybe 6 months or a year or more of this business. What are you truly expected to make? What is the seasonality in some of that? Or even if you're don't have your own business, but you individually may be working 20 hours at a particular place, but that's not certain, etc. What is it on average over a longer period of time? So that you can say, okay, well, you know what? In the months that are good, put that away, put some of that away, so that, you know, in the months that are bad, or the periods that are bad, or the weeks that are bad, you can rely on that to supplement the expenses that still need to maintain you. Again, very much a personal circumstance. And those are one of the questions that you really have to, one of the questions and scenarios where it is, okay, what is my particular situation? But for me, those are some of the tips that I would talk about. And I have told people who have uncertain income or fluctuated income in different periods, where on a weekly basis or a monthly basis.
Okay, agreed. I support that. I have an attendee who wants allowing him a minute or two just to speak to the advent of investment in cryptocurrency, and then I'm going to have you follow that. I believe you understand, for obvious reasons. So let me just unmute Mr. Hope and have him share what he wanted to. And I think it's important because there's a lot of talk about cryptocurrencies as an investment instrument, and they're being used in various forms. So Hallam, I believe you should be able to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes, thanks, David. And I'm going to be very brief because I understand your focus this evening. But it does start to get around to the whole question of investment. Now, there's a lot of misinformation about cryptocurrencies and what's not. And obviously, everything it relates to education. The more educated you are, then the better you are to invest. What I will say to you is this, and you can trust me on this, okay? We have developed a strategy, and I won't say who we are. We have developed a strategy where persons who have disposable income can actually invest it, and they can earn on every trade and investment, and they can look at it in terms of as a long-term gain. Now, so that actually can work. There are a lot of scams out there. There are a lot of people who will promise you that they can make investments turn around for you, and there are a lot of scams out there. But I can say to you that with education, it is possible with those persons who have disposable income. It is very possible, and we have proven it. We have the empirical evidence that you can actually earn significantly. And not only that, more importantly, rather than just keeping your money in the bank and it's just not doing anything, but more importantly, your goal ought to be to earn above the rate of inflation. If you're earning above the rate of inflation using cryptocurrencies, then you're doing quite well and you can plan for the future. But I don't want to talk too much because I know it's your program. Yeah.
Thanks,
Any
Callum.
questions?
That's useful, and I want to reiterate the point you made about education in an age where there's so much misinformation, and as some quarters will refer to it as fake news. And I know when it comes to investments and returns, there's a lot of misinformation. So thanks for that, and I would encourage persons to do their research because I know there are a lot of questions on cryptocurrencies and the returns you can have there. Raymond, there's another question here that I think is critical for you to respond to. The person is asking, how important is it to get children on board with the family budget? And I know you referenced Crystal's session, and I have actually been speaking to her while you were presenting. She was on the Facebook live stream, and I was talking to her by WhatsApp. So I think there's a critical question here, and it could be very important to the sustainability of the budget in the household. Where you have the children on board with the family budget. So I'll let you answer that.
No problem. Extremely important for a number of reasons. One, it starts from a very young age, understanding the importance of money and how to use it and use it for different purposes, for spending, for saving, for investing, and really starts building a framework in young people's mind. And I think once we start doing that, we will see over generations maybe a shift in the way Caribbean people look at savings and investment and money management. So if you can start talking to your kids about budgeting and saving and investing at an early age, don't make the assumptions that they don't understand. I mean, this younger generation is really surprising us. So from as early as, I don't know, 3 years old or when they start counting, let them count coins. But very important for them to get involved. It also then makes it easier when they get into teens, etc., to understand the importance of money management and budgeting, etc. And then, when if they're going to go into the supermarket and throw a tantrum because they can't afford tea time, or you don't want to buy tea times, etc., it also helps them. You can refer back to, you remember we talked about the budget, we've already done this, etc. So extremely important. And Crystal's session was very interesting in talking about money management for children.
And I'll add to that, Raymond. Firstly, from personal experience, I know when I was younger, my parents used to give us an allowance, primary school, and it increased somewhat when we got to secondary school. But me and my siblings many times didn't use the allowance for what our parents intended. We set it aside and saved it towards something we thought we wanted that they weren't going to buy because I didn't think it was important at the time. And going on from there, I would say, I think where children are involved, one of the other critical advantages is that children then start to see the sense in the use of money, and you will start to see where they'll have a piggy bank with their money that they're saving, and you will say to them, well, you can use your money to buy snacks, and they'll quickly tell you, no, that's for you to do, mommy or daddy. My money is for X or Y. So I think involving them at an early age will also start to teach them the importance of money, and they'll see the things and start to prioritize. And it should also adjust their behaviors in terms of some of the demands that they make on us as parents, saying, I want this, I want that, because now their money has sense, and it helps them to see that our money as parents has the same sense as well, because we have commitments and we have to prioritize as well. The last remaining question in the chat right now is, how do you go about investing in stocks internationally? And I know you probably can't get into that in significant detail now, but maybe just a couple of seconds speaking towards what can be done there. Maybe even it is a matter of being able to get in contact with one of the brokerage houses where you can get some more personalized advice.
Yes. Actually, it's not as difficult as a lot of persons would imagine. There obviously are some exchange rules that you need to navigate from a Barbados perspective, as we have our own struggles with foreign exchange. But but it's not that difficult. What I would say is, rather than me perhaps give any particular advice now, I'll give just a personal snippet. But the Instagram that I mentioned, and maybe we can provide that. I believe it's my 2 cents. Maybe I can use my Instagram to take a really quick look at it. They have advice and detail, almost a detailed process of how you can, and I'm just trying to look at it as I go, how to invest internationally. Let me see, I think it's my 2 cents is the Instagram. Yeah. So, my 2 cents.bb, all in words. So mytwocents.bb. Nikita Gibson has some really good advice, including, I believe it has international investing on here. But certainly it wasn't that difficult. I, from not a previous life, but earlier in my life, had a TD Waterhouse account. So I was able to do some international investing through that. But I mean, I won't get into details on that. The other thing about, and I wanted to address, David, if you permit me, on cryptocurrency, what David said is absolutely important. Cryptocurrency is out there for everyone, so there are different forms to get involved. The most important thing is education. Educate yourselves. Am I involved in cryptocurrency investments? I would say yes. Am I involved in a significant way? I would say no, because part of that is part of the risk aversion. What level of risk aversion am I at? Cryptocurrency, whether you're involved directly through a stock, through a fund, whatever the case may be, it is volatile, risk and return. So, and part of that volatility is you can get in at, and I'll just randomly call in a number, at $50 per share or per unit, or whatever the case may be if you're buying a stock or a fund. And tomorrow that may be down by, $35, or tomorrow it may be up by $65 or up to $65. So it is volatile. So I would say educate yourself more than anything else. And then also know what your level of risk aversion is. If you know that you're talking about a portfolio, you have $10,000 saved away. If you're willing to invest all, by all means. If you're willing to invest a portion of it, then by all means. But more than anything else, educate yourselves. I had to educate myself about cryptocurrency. I had to educate myself about the volatility of cryptocurrency, and I had to make a personal decision whether I want to be anywhere involved, either directly in terms of buying directly into a cryptocurrency, or buying a fund, or buying a stock, etc. That was it. Hopefully I answered the 2 questions in terms of international investing, and I also wanted to address the cryptocurrency comment.
Yes, I didn't even realize my 2 cents was Nikita, because I've been following what she's been doing ever since she started, and she is one of the persons that I would like to have a chat with to see how she can support and how we can collaborate with her, because I think her approach and everything has been quite useful. So
yeah, it's been fantastic.
Thanks for all of those references and
no problem
that you've given. Do we have any more questions or comments from our audience? I think this has been a wonderful session, just speaking based on the interaction and feedback from the attendees. I know Raymond knows what he's doing, so but I'm happy to see the level of engagement that has come from his session. And this session will be run again for those who didn't have the opportunity today. And of course, the recording of the live stream will be on Facebook immediately after, and the full Zoom recording will also be available within 24 to 48 hours. And I'm working on having all of those uploaded to the ministry's website. And we're working on another initiative to have the database maintained independently as well for easy access and on-demand access. So if there are no other questions, what I will start to do is thank Raymond for joining us this evening and for being able to impart his knowledge in an easy way. If one takeaway I have is that I realize he has caused persons' minds to start going and to address the whole issue of budgeting. And I think in this environment, the advent of COVID and the effect of unemployment and layoffs and so on has made this an important area. And I'm looking at the registration levels for certain topics, and I think it's indicating to us where some of the challenges and the interests are within the public domain. Just as a reminder, our sessions are held every Tuesday and Thursday starting at 6 p.m. in the evening. Some of those days we carry 2 sessions, one specifically to individuals and households and the other more catering towards SMEs and small businesses. But regardless, all sessions will be recorded and will be available on demand for those who may not have the time to join us. And I really want to thank all of you for registering. We had 93 persons registered, and I think we got as high as 60 persons actually logging on. But not being able to log on is not a disadvantage. As I said, recordings will be available. Please continue to follow us on our social media pages at FLB.246. And this is on Facebook and Instagram right now. Our YouTube channel will be launched shortly, as well as a LinkedIn page. And we are working on a dedicated landing page on the ministry's website, all in an effort to provide various avenues to contact you and to provide ongoing information. Some of the key tips from Raymond's presentation today, we will work with him to create small Instagram and other social media posts, tips and reminders for you coming out of his session so that we can keep the conversation going with you and encourage you to budget. Our IG pages and the Facebook page, the handles are FLB.246, or you can search Financial Literacy Bureau and they come up as well. So please feel free to search and follow us for more information. Our pages are being built out every day. It is a somewhat tedious process at times, but we are committed to making sure we can help all of you understand finance matters better. Reference was made by Raymond to building generational wealth, and there was a question in the chat about generational wealth, and I think one attendee said this was the first time they heard about it. At the core of what we are doing is making sure persons can create capital, generate wealth for generations within their families, and be able to manage their financial affairs and understand all things financial. And our slogan is making sense of your dollars, safeguarding your future. So I want to end by thanking all of you once again for joining us this evening, and thanking our presenter, Raymond, for taking time out to be with us. Thank ICAB for helping us to secure Raymond as one of their members, and also thank Deloitte for allowing him the time to present to us as well in providing a public service at the end of the day, because all of these sessions are provided free of cost for our attendees and for the public. So I wish you all a good night and look forward to seeing you on another Zoom webinar brought to you by the Financial Literacy Bureau. Thanks again and have a good night.
Making sense of your dollars, safeguarding your future, learning to manage your money, invest, save and plan for the future. For the future, the Financial Literacy Bureau, that's the way to go. Making sense of your dollars, safeguarding your future, make plans and build, stretch every dollar. I tell you, knowledge is power, power. Woo! Making sense of your dollars, safeguarding your future.
For more information, call 535-7700 or visit our website commerce.gov.bb. The Financial Literacy Bureau, making sense of your dollars, safeguarding your future.